In Brussels, consultant Peter Bell sees potential. He's advising British companies who want to move their businesses here to mainland Europe post-Brexit. But it's tough to advise when Brexit negotiators have so far failed to reach any agreements on how the divorce will play out.
My advice is to stay nimble, stay flexible, run with the uncertainty. It's uncertain, so how can you make a decision? Okay, so if that's not good advice, I don't know what is.
And that's advice he'll have to keep on giving for some time. After a week of talks, EU and UK negotiators haven't made significant progress on how this breakup will work. There's still no telling what's going to happen to the Irish border, what the rights will be of EU citizens in the UK and vice versa, and how much money the UK will owe the EU for commitments it's already made. The so-called Brexit bill is the most divisive issue.
After this week, it is clear that the UK does not feel legally obliged to honour its obligations.
The Commission has set out its position, and we have a duty to our taxpayers to interrogate it rigorously.
And it's that back and forth that's frustrating for business leaders who just want to know what the future relationship between the UK and the EU is going to look like.
The strategy, the tactics of how they do that in the negotiation, I'm going to leave that to the government. But what I want is for them to find a way to get going, to get to those detailed questions, and to break through the things that are difficult.
In the meantime, for consultants like Peter Bell, his main message to clients is the only certain thing is uncertainty.
Everybody's going to feel this is going too slow, is there going to be a deal, there's going to be nervousness, etc., etc. But we could look forward to that for a good time yet.
The fourth round of negotiations is set to begin 4 weeks from now. The hope was enough progress would be made between the EU and the UK, so talks of a new trade deal could begin this fall. For those operating businesses between the English Channel, that is of utmost importance. But with these talks progressing so slowly now, any discussion of trade may not begin until next year. Kevin Ozebek, TRT World, Brussels.
Let's get more on this now from Kallum Pickering. He joins me from London. He's the Senior UK Economist at German private banking company Berenber. Kallum, welcome back to Money Talks. Now, let's start with sterling. It fell to its lowest level in about a week against the euro after this latest round of talks. Are investors, in your opinion, beginning to price in a Brexit with no trade deal?
Well, markets have been pricing in that for almost the last 12 months, when the economy has been kind of holding up okay, but sterling is weak. That sort of tells you that something else is going on. And that thing that's going on is markets are worrying whether or not the UK will leave the EU with a deal or not. When sterling starts to go up, that will tell you that markets are discounting that prospect, but that seems far away.
I see. The latest figures show that net migration into the UK has fallen to its lowest levels in about 3 years. And the biggest drop was actually among people coming from the EU. Is this going to make it easier, in your opinion, for the government to shift its focus away from migration and focus more on trade?
Yes, it will. Remember, the UK is unlikely to discuss trade within the 2-year period set out in the treaties. It will mainly be discussing Brexit. Trade will be discussed in the transitional period, which will probably take 3 years, beginning March 2019. By that point, if recent trends in migration continue, it should virtually be a non-issue, in which case the bar that Mrs. May has to meet to convince people at home she's doing something about migration will be significantly lower. That means Britain will be open for a trade deal with the EU. It will certainly help things along.
This issue of migration, though, is a very visceral issue in the UK. And, I mean, a lot of the media, like the tabloid press, have been pressing this issue and pushed the agenda very aggressively. Is this going to be a factor as we go forwards, or do you see these kinds of issues kind of fading out over the coming weeks, even from people like the kind of newspapers I'm referring to?
There are a few issues where the reality is so far away from the press than migration. Britain benefits enormously from the migrants that come from the EU. They are almost all of working age. They have high levels of labour market participation and they are better educated than natives. But of course, the press doesn't write it this way. So I find that if the numbers go down, it will be much harder for the press to make the pure numbers story. So that's what I'm looking for. Of course, the issue may shift to what happens with the Northern Irish border. If Britain agrees to a seamless border, you may see the headlines, well, Ireland may be a backdoor for EU migrants, but hopefully, given that it's such a serious issue, that won't pervade British politics too much.
Kallum, I want you to look into your crystal ball for a while for me. What data points, economic data points, are you looking at that are coming up over the next few weeks that are going to give us an indication of where the British economy is in relation to these Brexit negotiations?
House prices. Uncertainty from Brexit is not hitting the economy in a major way, and consumers are dealing with inflation well. The economy will grow at around 1.7% this year. Without Brexit, it might be 2.5%, say. But so much debt is tied up to the housing market that if house prices were to soften further and indeed begin to fall, that would almost certainly take the economy with it. 70% of all GDP is consumption, and there's a 4-to-1 ratio between house prices and consumption. So if house prices went down 4%, consumption would go down 4%. The economics from that is straightforward. So if you want to know where the UK economy is going, look at house prices.
Okay, Kallum Pickering, Berenber in London, thank you ever so much.